来ましたね。はい。はい、今大丈夫です。はい、大丈夫です。はい。あ、来ました。はい、来ました。十分来てます。
Good evening, and welcome to Tsukiji Hongwanji Buddhist Temple. Everyone, please join me in Gassho. Thank you so much for coming to the Saturday English service. First, we'd like to begin the service by reciting the aspiration, which can be found on page 2 in the blue service book.
Aspiration. Reverently, we come before the shrine of our Amitabha, the Holy One, the Perfect One. With gratitude, we have brought our offering of love and devotion to honor the Buddha. We earnestly resolve to strive to understand the holy teaching and to walk every day in the blessed path, so that, like the Buddha, may we attain the peace of Nirvana.
Now, we will chant the sutra Junsege. Please turn to page 3 of the same service book.
Oh
sing the gathas Kinship Anthem found on page 5 in the same book. Congregation, please rise. Please stand up. Of the Three Purges found on page 4 in the same service book.
The Three Treasures. Difficult is it to receive a human form. Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Dharma of the Buddha. Now we hear it. If we do not cross over to the truth in the present life, in what life shall we cross over? Let us, with sincerity and true reverence, take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we, together with all sentient beings, awaken to the great way of enlightenment and to the unsurpassed intent of Amitabha. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we, together with all sentient beings, enter the storehouse of the Dharma, becoming like the wisdom ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we, together with all sentient beings, become units in true accord, in harmony with all things. The peerless, profound and wondrous Dharma is rare to encounter, even in many hundreds and thousands of kalpas. Now we are privileged to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teachings. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha.
Please be seated. This evening, we We are so happy to have Reverend Koshin Yamamoto, resident minister of Myoenji Temple in Kanagawa, as our speaker. Yamamoto Sensei will talk on living is coincidental, death is inevitable, living and dying embraced by Amitabha. I am so glad to introduce Yamamoto Sensei to you.
You're going to put your hands together and Gassho. Entrust yourself to Amida's primal vow. Through the benefit of being grasped, never to be abandoned. All who entrust themselves to the primal vow attain the supreme enlightenment. Amen. Amen. Good evening, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the Dharma talks in English at Tsukiji Hongwanji. It has been quite a while that we have had practically one or two members attending because of COVID, and it is so nice to have so many of you here this evening. For those of you joining us on the web, welcome, and it is an honor to be here. Tsukiji Hongwanji has been hosting the English Dharma talks for over 70 years now. We have a history of originally being a Sunday service, every Sunday service. But throughout the years, we've had to switch from weekly to monthly, and now we are having one service per month. My name is Koshin Yamamoto, and as I have been introduced, I am the resident minister of Myoenji Buddhist Temple in Kawasaki, which is just west of Tokyo. Tsukiji Hongwanji, as many of you know, is a Jodo Shinshu temple. Jodo Shinshu was founded by the master Shinran Shonin, or Master Shinran, who lived from 1173 to 1263. The mother temple is in Kyoto, and Jodo Shinshu has temples throughout the world, and many of you joining us today, possibly on the web also, may have had an occasion to visit one of the temples and come in contact with the teachings of Buddha. In Jodo Shinshu and also in the Jodo Pure Land School, the teachings are based upon the Buddha Amitabha. This is the same Buddha with different characteristics actually. The two characteristics of Amitabha is infinite life and infinite light. Amitabha is infinite light, and Amitabha is infinite life. Now, infinite light would point out to the wisdom of Buddha, and infinite life would point to the compassion of the Buddha. So we have infinite light and infinite life. Both names coincide with the Amita part. And because Sanskrit was written later after the original historical Shakyamuni Buddha. The sermons were transcribed later. They were passed on word to word through the generations that it was finally assembled into a form of a sutra. So there is a gap because originally during the historical Buddha's days, there was no written language per se. So what has been transmitted from India is the canons, the sutras, which were sermons by the original historical Buddha, who lived over 2,500 years ago. So the teachings of Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite life and infinite light, also came from the historical Buddha, the Shakyamuni Buddha. It was expounded from the original historical Buddha. I have the opportunity today to talk about the topic, living is coincidental, death is inevitable. And the subtitle is Living and Dying Embraced by the Amitabha. I chose this subject because within the last 3 years, the world in general has been undergoing quite a turmoil, especially with COVID. And a lot of people have passed on because of a disease, a virus. And aside from that, quite recently, we've seen what's been going on in Ukraine. And all of this suggests to us that we must face our daily lives. Before I continue, I'm seeing familiar faces and new faces. How many of you here today are first-timers? I'd like to welcome all of you. Where did you learn about the English Dharma talk?
I learned that a bit through the scout group here with friends.
And where did you learn about English?
I go to the Japanese preach on every Saturday in this center.
So you joined us here after that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming. A number of people who have been visiting Japan, they will be leaving tomorrow, but they've made the time to join us in the evening, just prior to leaving. And it brings us great joy to have them returning also on their next trips. I will continue now. As to statistical things, the Bureau of Statistics in Japan in 2021 has announced that the average lifespan of Japanese women is 87.74 years and 81.64 years for males. And this figure has been rising for a decade now. So every year, people are getting longer life expectancies. These statistical figures are among the top 3 of what's been reported worldwide. But as you know, some countries do not report their statistics. So Japan is one of the geologically senior nations. Needless to say, the average age, life expectancy, is this figure, 87.74 and 81.64. But that is not necessarily the healthy lifespan of people. And so we have a much lower statistic here. The average healthy lifespan is 75.38 for women and 72.68 for men. So a little bit lower, roughly 10 years lower for both male and female. Which is to say that as you age, your health slowly decays, and also some of us will be experiencing dementia or other things associated with aging. And so even though the average of lifespan is high, our productivity, our quality of life is less. And unfortunately, when the figure rises, people expect to live to that age. You think that, okay, I've got 20 more years, or I've got 30 more years. But in reality, this is not the case. So we must face the fact that the average includes higher as well as lower. And where you are in life now, you are not sure, and nobody is sure about that. We tend to try to cling to our younger selves, how we look, and to our health, as if aging and sickness is a bad characteristic. We don't want to part with our loved ones. Life would be fantastic, actually, if all of our loved ones and all of the people we love, all the people that are around us can grow healthy and age together. But unfortunately, we must part with them. Buddhism teaches dependent origination, Engi. In the handouts, I have this as number 1, I think. Dependent origination, Engi, and Innen. And this is interconnected origination. This is interdependent origination. For every effort, there is a cause, and everything is interconnected, interrelated. Nothing happens spontaneously and without cause. This is a given fact of Buddhism. Nothing happens just out of nowhere. I remember back in my junior high school days, we had science class. And one of the experiments that we did was on spontaneous generation. And spontaneous generation, as some of you may know, is rise of life from nothing. And how this was carried out, we left out strips of meat on a petri dish. One was covered with cheesecloth, and the other one was just open air, in the open air. And that was left on the windowsill for a few days. And what we saw is that on the petri dish with the meat uncovered, we saw fly maggots. And these maggots seemed to just come out of nowhere. Nobody's seen it, but the meat was full of maggots. So a conclusion here is that, okay, this came from nowhere. Their meat gave rise to maggots, or the maggots just gave rise to itself. In the other petri dish, which was covered with cheesecloth, there was nothing there. So it comes to show you that by leaving it out in the open, adult flies were able to come and feast on the meat and also lay eggs on the meat, so that maggots were able to reproduce or to arise from the meat. But if you only see the meat in the petri dish, you might think that, okay, maggots came out of nowhere. Maggots just arise by itself. But this is considered spontaneous generation because it's not rooted. You cannot see where it came from. Versus the petri dish and the meat in the cheese cloth, since there was nothing there, it means that the mother or the cause of the maggots did not have access to the meat. So therefore, the conclusion here is that spontaneous generation doesn't happen. You don't get maggots rising from nowhere. I was thinking about life in general, and when you think about yourself now, in your current situation, our lives now is a result of all interrelated connections and circumstances. These causes made what we are now. We didn't come out of nowhere. We are not spontaneously generated. Genetically speaking, from a genetic point, we have our ancestors. And when you look at the figures of ancestors, in order to be born, I don't know from now on, science is getting better a bit. I don't know if the word better is correct, but the science is getting to the point that it's able to reproduce life to a certain degree. But in our current situation now, we have to have a father and a mother to be born. So therefore, one generation ago would be 2. And this is a binary calculation. Each mother and father would have a mother and father, so therefore 2 generations ago that would be 4. And then before that would be 8, before that would be 16, before that would be 32. And then double that is 64, double that is 128, double that is 256. And 10 generations ago, we would have to have 1,024 people, or 1,024 people who are directly connected with us. And that's 10 generation. 10 generations is about 350 years, roughly. Do you know what happens when you go back 20 generations? Each one of us would need to have 1 million associations. So we have, from 20 years ago, roughly 500 to 600 years ago, there would have to be 1 million people for each one of us to be born. And just that alone shows that we have to be connected someplace. Because 20 generations ago, Japan didn't have that kind of population. So we have to be connected someplace. We are individually the result of 1 million or 1,024 people 10 generations ago. But as a result, we are who we are, not spontaneously generated. From a Buddhistic point, in Buddhism, we try to explain life. And before we were able to be born into human life, we have been transmigrating in a circle of life and death. And this includes 6 realms, 6 worlds. The bottom is called hell. The second is the world of hungry pretas or hungry demons. The third would be the realm of animals. The fourth would be the realm of angry spirits, Shira. The fifth is human. And above that, there is a realm called heavenly beings. All of these are considered worlds of the non-enlightened. And this is a world of suffering. And some of you might think, why would the realm of heavenly beings be considered a world of suffering? Well, according to the explanation, the people or the heavenly beings in the sixth realm, they're so absorbed in how beautiful they look and how everything is so nice that you've lost essentially a sense of caring, and so therefore you are so involved with the beauty of things, these heavenly beings. So in Buddhism, then we say that to be born into human life is when we have an opportunity to see and to receive a way out from the circle of transmigration. So as humans, we are finally able to hear and receive the path out from this endless transmigration. I'd like to share a story. Some of you might take it seriously, some of you might not, but and many of you have heard this before, but bear with me. The story goes like this. Have you heard the story about the Buddhist coroner who worked in a large city? He was relieved of his position because he took his profession dead seriously. Pun intended. Okay, why was this Buddhist coroner relieved from his job? And the reason for this is because the city fired him because he wrote the same reason for all the cases that he did an autopsy on, regardless of how the deceased passed away or how the deceased circumstances were. And he wrote in the cause of death section, death, in the story. So what this means is that as Buddhists, as long as you are born, as long as you have birth, as long as you have attained life, death is a part of your life. It is not something that is different. It is the same part of your life. And life, birth, aging, illness, and death are all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same life. So we try not to negate any of this, since it is a part of our lives. And this is the teaching of Buddhism, to accept what we have, what we have been given, since they are all unavoidable. Trying to avoid the unavoidable causes pain. And like I said in the beginning, if we try to attach ourselves to our younger self, or how we look, or to health, and we start to lose that, we would be in pain. We would suffer. And this suffering is what Buddhism tries to relieve. And how it's relieved is to understand the nature of what birth, aging, illness, and death is. So, as we've all been given life, that it's inevitable that is going to be a part of our lives. There's no use in trying to avoid dying. And with current medical situations like transplanting or with the new iPS cells, we might be able to live a longer life through the regenerated or newly made parts, but at the end, it is impossible for us to not pass away. So you can prolong dying, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to die. And that is the case with the medical situation in all over the world. Medically, you can treat a person until there is nothing that medicine can do for the person. At that point, since there is no longer a medical treatment, the person is more or less have to select to be passing on in another situation. Many of this is like in palliative care or in hospices. And we've seen cases where our relatives have become invalid or they've become disabled so that they have to use some of this. But medically, they are not treatable. Medically, they are not, they cannot negate dying. So hospice, palliative care, all are part of dying. So usually this has been a part separate from medicine. Because we humans are conscious and we have reasoning, we are bound to what we have and have very difficult time accepting loss. Death causes sorrow and pain. Therefore, we want to avoid things that causes us pain. Aging, illness, and death are all too often looked upon as being negative, as compared in contrast to youth, health, and birth. Daily life is a consequence of interrelated events. Nothing is preset or predestined. Since every action gives rise to a different situation, all of our actions have consequences on lives of others as well. Coincidences arise from everything that's been interrelated to our lives. No 2 days are the same because the consequences are different. Every day is a new one because they have been arising from different sets of circumstances. Every moment is a gift. It's a present which can never be repeated nor undone. Our lives are an accumulation of single moments. I don't know if you remember movies, film movies. You don't take film movies anymore, you take videos and you take smartphone movies. But long before they had film movies, they are frames of individual pictures. And when you run the pictures, individual frames, you see motion. Essentially, our lives are like that. We have pieced together all of our moments, and we are now who we are now. And what we are doing now would have a direct consequence on our future lives. I'd like to speak on a renowned researcher, Swiss-American psychiatrist. And for those who know her or know of her, it may have completely different meaning. But her name is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she lived July 8, 1926 to August of 2004. She's known for her work on the terminally ill patients and is a pioneer of near-death studies. Through her interviewing of thousands of patients and cases, she pioneered hospice care, palliative care, and near-death research. She was the impetus of what we see in the medical field now of palliative care. She authored the book on death and dying, and this was printed in 1969, where she first discussed her theory of grievances, five stages of grief. And it is known as the Kubler-Ross model now. And these are what she has come up with by talking and interviewing with patients who are near death and who must accept death. It was very difficult to accept death. And so many of the patients were angry. They were angry at themselves. They were angry at other people. They were angry at other entities. Why do I have to die? And this pain, unless you come to terms with it, unless you come to understand it and accept it, that you have to accept death because you cannot exist forever. When that process was accepted, patients became calm, they became at peace. And so the Kubler-Ross model shows the different levels, the 5 levels that of grief and pain that people go through. She did not pass judgment on her patients, depending on their religious orientation. She listened and took records of what the patients experienced from a research point of view. So she did not negate anything. She only researched. She took down and took notes of experiences and what people were going through and what people have experienced in their lives. Because of this nature of her research, it had attracted people of religion, those interested in the paranormal and occult, as well as miracle seekers. Although she was discredited for being conned, and her name was misused by some ill-willed people, the amount of research that she did through her interviews is a very valuable resource for all religions. And the contribution that she made to medical care and to society in general is huge. Her studies have shown that people in general have a very difficult time accepting death. By not being able to acknowledge the inevitable, they go through extreme suffering. In her Kubler-Ross grief model, people have finally come to terms with the situation that they are facing and were able to attain peace of mind, regardless of their religious orientation. Concerning her interviews with people who have had near-death experiences, and these are called NDEs, or out-of-body experiences, these are called OOBEs. Many medical doctors and scientists have tried to scientifically explain them as being hallucinogenic or due to oxygen deprivation in the brain. But I don't see a reason to scientifically explain these experiences, because these are experiences that thousands of people have experienced. So we see that the people of different cultures, how they accept death is different. And in general, Kubler-Ross has said that those cultures with background, with a view in reincarnation, were able to accept death and change. She has stated that every living moment is a gift. During the many years that I have been a Buddhist minister or monk, Buddhist priest, I too have had experiences that people have shared what they've encountered, what they have gone through. And some of them are NDEs, some of them are OOBEs. But the best I can do is to listen to them, because this is what they've experienced. I haven't experienced that, so I cannot say, but what they've experienced is what has been told to me. And this is exactly what Kubler-Ross has done. She's written down people's experiences. She didn't add anything to that. So that's why I give her research a lot of credit, because it's research. You're not trying to explain anything. You're not trying to discredit her. Buddhism teaches how to accept the various realities of life and how to live with them, not against them. I'd like to share with you the story of Kisa Gotami. I have that written on the handout. The story of Kisa Gotami is it's left, we can see it in a Pali text. Pali is the old text, written text. I have in parentheses poppy seed, because Kisa Gotami's story has both a mustard seed version and a poppy seed version, but the rest is all the same. What seed did the historical Shakyamuni Buddha ask her to bring? The story is like this. During Buddha's time, there lived a woman named Kisa Gotami. She married young and gave birth to a son. One day, the baby fell sick and died when about 8 years old, just barely walking, very cute. Kisa Gotami refused to believe that her son was dead. She could not accept the death of her son. So she was crazed with sorrow and carried the body of her son around the village, her village, asking if there was anyone who had medicine to treat and heal him. The villagers all saw that the son was already dead and that there was nothing that could be done. They advised her to accept this death and to make arrangements for the funeral. In great grief, she fell upon her knees and clutched the boy's son's body close to her, and she kept uttering for her son to wake up. A village elder took pity on her and suggested that she consult the historical Shakyamuni Buddha. He said, "Kisa Gotami, we cannot help you, but you should go to the Buddha. Maybe he can bring your son back to life." Kisa Gotami was extremely excited upon hearing the elder's words. She went to the place where the Buddha was teaching and asked about medicine for her son. The Buddha said that he could help her. But first, she must bring him a mustard seed or a poppy seed. But, continued the Buddha, the mustard seed must be taken from a house where no one residing in the house has ever lost a family member. Bring the seed back to me, and your son will come back to life. Kisa Gotami was elated. My son is coming back. Sure, poppy seeds, mustard seeds, I can get those. She went from one house to another asking for the mustard poppy seeds. All were willing to give her what she wanted. But when she asked if anyone had ever died in the house, she was told, of course, people have died here. Every house that she went to. Finally, it sank into Kisa Gotami that the death came to everyone. And all beings were impermanent. Kisa Gotami finally came to realize how selfish she had been, thinking only of her son and about the predicament that she was in, and that there was no one in the world who had never lost a family member to death. She now understood that death is inevitable and a natural part of life. When she realized this, her mind cleared. Putting aside her grief, she was able to put her son and hold his funeral. She then returned to the Buddha and said, "I have resolved the matter of the mustard seed. I understand now." And she became a follower of the Buddha. She had found peace in the Buddhist teaching. The Buddha did not give her a straight answer. She was guided to awaken to her selfishness and to the truths of life. This is the story of Kisa Gotami and the mustard seed, poppy seeds. So life is a part of our life. It is inevitable. Master Shinran Shonin, in his hymns of True Shinjin and Nembutsu, states, "The name embodying the primal vow is the act of true settlement. The vow of entrusting with sincere mind is the cause of birth in the Pure Land. We realize the equal of enlightenment in supreme nirvana through the fulfillment of the vow of attaining nirvana without fail. Shakyamuni Tathagata appeared in this world solely to teach the ocean-like primal vow of Amida. We, an ocean of beings in an evil age of vile defilements, should entrust ourselves to the Tathagata's words of truth. When the one thought moment of joy arises, nirvana is attained without severing blind passions. When ignorant and wise, even grave offenders and slanderers of the Dharma, all alike turn and enter Shinji, they are like waters that, on entering the ocean, become one and taste with it. The light of compassion that grasps us illumines, and protects us all. The darkness of our ignorance is already broken through. Still, the clouds and mists of greed and desire, anger and hatred, cover, as always, a sky of true and real Shinji. But, though the light of the sun is veiled by the clouds and mist, beneath the clouds and mist there is darkness. There is brightness, not dark. And this is from Shinran hymns on true Shinji in Nembutsu. We are illumined by the great compassion. Having received the workings of the Buddha, Amitabha's primal vow, to save all sentient beings. It is the working of Amitabha's other power. Even though we still have our grief, our hardships, already are we assured of enlightenment here. Enlightenment would be the attainment of Buddhahood through the birth in the Pure Land at the end of our present lives. With this assurance, we are able to live full lives, appreciating every aspect of our daily lives. Unfortunately, due to our limited capacities, the working of the Buddha is beyond our understanding. In Master Shinran Shonin's writings, it is stated as being inconceivable and incomprehensible to human life. We can be awakened to the primal vow, but we would probably not be able to understand it. For it is absolute compassion. Shinran Shonin's words have been recorded in a work called the Record of Lament of Divergencies. I have that in the paper there. It is a collection of Master Shinran's words written down by Yuenbo, who closely accompanied the master. In chapter 9, it is stated, although I say the Nembutsu, the feeling of dancing with joy is fate in me, and I have no thought of wanting to go to the Pure Land quickly. How should it be for a person of the Nembutsu? This is Yuenbo speaking. He says, although I say the Nembutsu and I am a person of the Nembutsu, the feeling of dancing with joy is fate in me, and I have no thought of wanting to go to the Pure Land quickly. So he's questioning, how should it be? And the Master Shinran Shonin answers, I too have had this question. And the same thought occurs to you too, Yuenbo. Shinran Shonin continues, when I reflect deeply on it, by the very fact that I do not rejoice at what should fill me with such joy, that I dance in the air and dance on the earth, I realize that all the more that my birth is completely settled. What suppresses the heart that should rejoice and keeps one from rejoicing is the action and of blind passions. Nevertheless, the Buddha, knowing this beforehand, called us foolish beings possessed of blind passions. Thus, becoming aware that the compassionate vow of other power is indeed for the sake of ourselves, who are such beings, and we find it all the more trustworthy. Further, having no thought of wanting to go to the Pure Land quickly, we think forlornly that we may die even when we become slightly ill. This is the action of blind passions. It is hard for us to abandon this old home of pain, where we have been transmigrating for innumerable kalpas down to the present, and we feel no longing for the Pure Land of peace, where we have yet to be born. Truly, how powerful are our blind passions. But though we feel reluctant to part from this world, at the moment our karmic bonds to the Saha world run out, and helplessly we die, we shall go to that land. Amida pities especially the person who has no thought of wanting to go to the Pure Land quickly. Reflecting on this, we feel the great vow of great compassion to be all the more trustworthy and realize that our birth is settled. Shinoshoni says, if we had the feeling of dancing with joy and wishing to go to the Pure Land quickly, we might wonder if we weren't free of blind passions. So, this passage shows that even though we know that we are able to attain, or through the power of Amitabha, through the vow of Amitabha, enlightenment or Buddhahood, we don't want to go there quickly because we've not been there, we've never seen it, and we are so attached to this current world. We are so deeply attached to it that we seek not to leave it. Shinoshoni is saying that through the workings of Amitabha's primal vow, we are assured of birth in the Pure Land and attainment of Buddhahood. But as we are still filled with blind passions and attachments, we cannot rejoice in and want to leave all this behind. The Amitabha's vow of great compassion only exists because we are like this. We are oblivious to the realities of life, or are living trying to avoid them because we are so attached to this Saha world. There are people who say, show me the Buddha, then I'll believe. Or, show me the Pure Land, then I'll believe. This is the same as saying, somebody gives you a gift, fruit. It's very rare. You've never had it before. But you're saying, if you can tell me how it tastes, I'll eat it. How something tastes cannot be told without putting it in your mouth. One senses and understands how it tastes while eating it. One is surely more able to gain some insight or understanding about the Buddha as well as the Pure Land while listening to the Dharma talks. One eats something not because you know how it tastes. You are led to understand how it tastes while eating it. Master Shinran teaches the importance of and emphasizes listening In Jōshin Buddhism, Amida's primal vow, working upon us to unconditionally save all sentient beings, is all that is required. It is received in the form of the Nembutsu, assuring us that we have indeed received Amida's great compassion. We are able to live every day in gratitude, regardless of difficulties we may face due to the coincidental events in our present lives. The Amida Buddha vowed to save sentient beings through the Nembutsu. The Nembutsu is available to all unconditionally and becomes effective at the very moment the receiver is led to wholeheartedly entrust upon the Amida's primal vow. Even if all of our worldly belongings were to be stripped away, our assurance of the workings of the Amida Buddha's primal vow cannot be taken away. Even if we are full of uncertainties, tainted with passions and suffering in this life, we are made aware of Amida Buddha's boundless compassion through the indirect conditions of others who have affected our lives. Even if we should become invalid due to illness or old age, or physically impaired from injuries, those conditions further enhance our awakening to the Buddha's compassion working upon us. Amida Buddha only sees all sentient beings as the same with equal value. This is the most peaceful assurance. Even though all sentient beings are provided with the Nembutsu, unless they are made aware of the great compassion of Amida Buddha's unsurpassed intent to save all suffering sentient beings, the Nembutsu remains dormant. This is where we, in our lives, we are able to recite the Nembutsu. We have already been embraced by the Amida Buddha. We've received the Nembutsu. Our actions will affect others who are connected with us. How we live will have an influence on the lives of others. I'd like to conclude my talk. In conclusion, we have seen that life is coincidental and is a result of interdependent origination. Once we have gained life and are born, death is inevitable and cannot in any way be done away with. We have finally been born into the human realm. The primal vow of Buddha, Amitabha Amitabha, works to save all sentient beings unequivocally. Master Shinran states that although we still live our lives surrounded by blind passions and attachments, we live each day assured of our attainment of Buddhahood in the Pure Land of the Amida Buddha, as we have already received the Nembutsu. Though death is inevitable, we remain in the samsara world guided by the great compassion. If you'll please join me with the hands together. Saved by the inconceivable workings of Amida's vow, I shall realize birth in the Pure Land. The moment you entrust yourself thus to the vow, so that the mindset upon saying the Nembutsu arises within you, you are immediately brought to share in the benefit of being grasped by the Amida, never to be abandoned. Know that the primary vow of Amida makes no distinction between people young and old, good and evil. Only Shinji is essential. For it is the vow to save the person whose karmic evil is deep and grave, and whose blind passions abound. Thus, for those who entrust themselves to the primal vow, no good acts are required, because no good surpasses the Nembutsu, nor Need they despair of the evil they commit? For no evil can obstruct the working of Amida's primal vow. Thank you for joining us today, and may all of you upkeep COVID-related sanitary things. Precautions must be taken for a while more. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening, and wish to see you again at another time.
Thank you so much for the Dharma talk, Yamamoto Sensei. We will now sing the gatha Namo Amida Butsu on page 6 in the blue service book. Congregation, please stand up. recite together the Kinship Creed found on page 2 in the same book. Followed will be the recitation of the benediction.
The Kinship Creed. We single-heartedly take refuge upon Tathagata Amitabha for the enlightenment in the life to come, abstaining from all sundry practices and teachings, and giving up the trust in our powerless self. We believe the assurance of our rebirth comes at the very moment we are led to entrust upon the Buddha. And we call the name Namo Amitabha in happiness and thankfulness for the Buddha's great compassion. We also acknowledge gratefully the benign benevolence of our founder and the succeeding masters who have led us to believe in this profound teaching. And we do now endeavor to follow throughout our lives the way laid down for us. Amida Buddha surrounds all men in all forms of life with infinite light and light. Particularly does the Buddha send forth loving thoughts to those in suffering and sorrow, to all those in doubt and ignorance, to all who are striving to attain truth, and to those whose feet are standing close to the great change men call death. Amitabha sends forth oceans of wisdom and compassion. Namo Amitabha. 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 Namo.
I would like to thank all of you for your attendance this evening service. The next service will be our Gautani service, which celebrates the birth of Shinran Shonins, and it will be held on May 28 at 5:30 p.m. in this same room. The guest speaker will be Reverend Dr. Kenneth Tanaka, and the topic will be the strength to suffer in the face of difficulties. Comprehension power, acceptance power, and the power of the original God. We look forward to seeing you again. Let us put our hands together in Gassho. Please feel free to come forward to offer incense. Once again, thank you so much for coming to today's service.